You were upset at this person before because they just wanted to do it their way, when in reality, like, all you had to do was say, like, "What are the foundational pieces of your way? And how can we see, like, how does this tie to what the overall goal needs to be?" And you find that red thread, and they have the motion of opening and closing the door, but you put them in the direction of, like, a toy truck, and now you let them do it their way. That's why I love that question for how people define a boss, a manager, and a leader, and also, like, why I love and start with values, because when you get into the heat of the moment or, like, hard conversations, 10 out of 10 times, the reason why there's animosity or, like, I say the primary emotion that they might see is anger or sadness or, like, however we wanna define that primary emotion, stems from secondary emotion that came from our values being infringed upon.
Turn this up, turn this up.
Your professional development is one of the keys to your career success. When you combine your desire to grow with actionable steps, your journey to success becomes an incredible reality.
Hi, I'm Paul Faronbi, aka IncrediPaul, and welcome to IncrediPaul Leadership, where we learn how to become the most incredible versions of ourselves by learning from each other. First off, if you're only listening to this episode, I want you to know that you can also watch it on YouTube. Regardless if you're listening or watching the show, really appreciate your support. Today, I have the honor of having Tiffeny Parker on the show. She's a dual Team USA elite athlete and Olympic trials qualifier turned high performance leadership coach. She's the founder of Sidetrack. She helps executives master the art of transitions, sustain peak performance, and collaborate to elevate their leadership legacy. So that was just a little bit about you, Tiffeny, but how about you introduce yourself the way you would do it?
Thanks so much, Paul. I think that's how I would do it. The energy you bring is absolutely amazing.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
my name's Tiffany, and I've just had the pleasure and the opportunity to be able to help people transition and transform, whether it's their personal life or their professional life, as an individual contributor and or as an executive leader of teams. I truly care about the progression of someone holistically, meaning how does that red line feed between how they want to show up as the human that they are, as well as, like, what do they want their leadership style to reflect as? And so in that work, I say, a lot of many lives. I come from the cognitive behavioral habit formation and wellness side. So I'm really intrigued with just, like, human behavior, the brain, how and why people show up the way that they choose to show up. From there, it led me into my love of kind of project management and operations. I'm very A-type personality, systems, data oriented, but B-type chill. Like, your girl gets there
Mm.
how she gets there. So it's very much, I would say, a grounding pillar of how I coach people, because I come from the lens, and even in Sidetracked and how it came about, I didn't believe that executive and corporate coaching was only supposed to be for executives. I feel like every human, it doesn't matter if you're an individual contributor, if you're the first time, like, coming out of college getting a job, everyone deserves the ability and the opportunity to progress personally and professionally. And so I came up with Sidetracked, because my mind's always somewhere in the world. I'm very abstract and creative. Also, track and field. Like, I've spent my life running around an oval, and, like, sometimes you need to stay in your lane. And sometimes you get a little sidetracked when you're trying to stay in your lane. And so it was very much just what my personality was. And yeah, life is transitions. Things are transitions. I was a heptathlete, which was, I mastered the art of transitioning in between events. And I realized it's a skill that people didn't have. And, like, that was my superpower, is transition and perspective. So that's how Sidetrack came about. From there, I wanted it to be accessible for everyone. Everyone couldn't afford executive leadership coaching. And I have a gift to be able to take abstract concepts and to create curriculum for it. And so I launched the Reflections Leadership Workshop or Workbook series. And I loved it. I loved being able to take the principles and put them on paper and to make them accessible to anyone, no matter where they are in their journey. And so, yeah, in a nutshell, from behavior and understanding humans and how they want to interact to launching Sidetrack, and then being the author of a workbook series, and then speaking and helping teams and change management and all the things that have made me me, really taking this idea and this concept of transition and making it tangible and applicable and fun. That's how I got here today.
No, that's really cool. Especially when you talked about like just the very nature of all the stuff you're doing as a heptathlete was transitioning. And that is
Yeah.
something that everyone has to go through, but not everyone does well. I would say majority of people don't do it.
Yeah. It's not I didn't know that I was doing it well until I realized I was doing it well.
No, that's funny. Actually, yeah, you want to talk about that? How did you come to that? Because I know you kind of briefly talked about you transitioned into doing this stuff with Sidetrack, but was there a moment or was there like a series of events that led up to what you're doing with Sidetrack?
Yeah. I was very fortunate and definitely it's always an opportunity to represent your country. I went from track and field, like I said, being a heptathlete, transitioned into the sport of bobsled. So very much very grateful to be able to compete in two different sports in two different seasons, summer and winter. And that was
That's
a
amazing, by
transition.
the way.
Thank you.
No,
Thank you.
people don't do that. Actually, it's incredible. Yeah.
I appreciate that. No, and it was hard. Like was in track and field for 10 years. I did 2 Olympic cycles in the I guess kind of like mountain to try to make that Olympic team. And it came with a lot of transition in my life and transition from all of my ships, I call it in my workbook. And ships for me is my work ships, my employee ships, my leaderships, my self ships. I really had to learn how to transition my entire being as a heptathlete. So, what does that look like? The heptathlon is constructed of 7 different events. So, we compete in 4 events the first day, 3 events the second day. Our first day, we do 100-meter hurdles. We high jump. You run and jump over a bar backwards. We throw shot put. So, it's a 4K ball that we literally launch in the air, and then we run 200 meters, which is a half of a lap. And then we're done with that. We get a certain amount of points depending on how fast we run, how high we jump, how far we throw. And then we get an accumulation of those points. Then we come back the next day, we long jump, we throw javelin, which is a spear we throw in the air as far as we can, and then we finish with our endurance event, which is 800 meters. And so the cool thing about the heptathlon is it's very giving and then also unforgiving at the same time. You might have your strengths, and people always tell you like focus on your strengths, nail your strengths in. Well, when you have 7 different events and you have 4 strengths, those other 3 you really kind of need to pay attention to.
Uh,
Unless you want to be even like world class at 4, you still better figure out how to be like in the mix for the other ones. And I was a speed power heptathlete. So hurdles, high jump, especially javelin, like those were my money events. Like I was really good at them in comparison to the field. I think
okay.
it's the A type in me. They're technical. They have a I know it's crazy. It's like it's wild. I learned my own behavioral characteristics later in life based on like how I've identified myself with these events. And the aimless things like running a 200 and an 800 did never understood them. They were my worst events. And people were like, you just
Really?
run. Literally, they were my worst events. I am a like just high stimulant cognitive thinker, like very much an intellect where like I learn different, meaning where people would see like a javelin approach. If you ever watch a YouTube video, you can see them doing their like 10 steps. Mine, there was a number count, but like I did mine based on a rhythm. And I know that rhythm now till this day. I haven't thrown a javelin in probably 5 years. And I'm a very rhythmic learner. If I can hear something, I can mimic it and it will always stick with me. And so, yeah, I learned all of these things with the heptathlon. And I would say most importantly, and how it got to sidetrack is there's a certain amount of time in between each of these events. So you can have a minimum of 30 minutes to transition yourself, or you could have a maximum of 2 hours, 4 hours, depending on if it's a European event. In the earlier stages of my career, I'm a very I feel a lot of things, we'll say it that way. I'm very passionate about what I do, and when I put my mind to something, I do it 100%. There is no mediocre in my life. Like, I do it to full potential or I don't do it at all. Um, and so if I had a bad hurdle race, and hurdles being one of my, like, money events, if it was bad, it would cripple me, and cripple me in the sense of no one would visually see it, but internally, I would be like, "I don't know how I'm gonna get through the rest of these 6 events." And I had 30 minutes to actually have that negative thought loop. So earlier in my career, I kind of sucked at transition, if I'm being transparent and honest. I
Okay.
was really bad at it because I couldn't let go of what I had done to move forward to what I had next. Regardless of how I felt, whether I hit a PR or set a national record in an event, I needed to be able to transition myself mentally, spiritually, emotionally, physically into my next high performance. Because the heptathlon is not just one event. Yes, I need to take one event at a time, but I needed to be able to transition into my best self, regardless of the result, 7 different times across 2 different days. And once I realized that, I set a routine for myself. I at first, it took me 30 minutes to transition into one event to the next event. At the end of my career, I'd got it down to 90 seconds. I let myself be pissed if I need to be pissed. I let myself celebrate if I had a personal best and I needed to celebrate. I got my bag, I put my headphones in, I listened I think at that point, it was like Tony Robbins was my right hand, and
Oh, yeah.
I put my feet up on the wall, and I gave myself the routine of transition. And that has set me up into everything that even I coach on today is helping people figure out their own personal rhythms and routines in life. And it doesn't matter if you're trying to figure out like when you operate best in your daily schedule during finals if you're a college student or you're someone trying an executive trying to manage your calendar and figure out what your energy flows are in the week to be your most productive. I really get the chance to kind of step back and see that from the creative kind of lens for myself and help them establish their transition routine because the goal is how can you show up for your next high performance? And it might not be that. Just because I transitioned didn't mean I'd have an amazing high jump, but I gave myself the best opportunity to be able to perform my best. And at the end of the day, that's all you can do. So
Giving
that's how
yourself the
sidetrack came.
best. That's that's incredible. Giving yourself the best opportunity to perform your best.
Mhm.
Did I say that right? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I really like how you tied it back into not only what you were doing in as a heptathlete, but whether you're a CEO, whether you're a college student, there are these transitions that you have. And I think it's human nature to focus in on a lot of times on the negative, but we focus in on a singular moment. Sometimes it can be positive, but I think for most of the time it's the negative side of things. We focus in on it and it can be a stumbling block. And the fact that you're able to go from 30 minutes to 90 seconds, you said good or bad, because if it's really
Mhm.
good, you want to celebrate for
Yep.
longer than I think I see longer than 90 seconds celebrations, like especially like in
Yeah.
soccer or something. They're like running around the field. So I think that's really impressive that whether it's positive or negative, that you're able to get it down to that short time.
Thanks. I appreciate that. It was not always rainbows and butterflies, but yeah, it was my emotional regulator before emotional regulation was even like a coined thing. Yeah, that's how I emotionally regulated. Like I needed to give myself time and space to fully feel how I felt. If I wanted to celebrate because I'd ran the fastest I ever ran, I still had to do 6 more events.
Fair.
So it helped me move into bobsled, which is a whole different arena. Like a whole different area. I went from running on a track to running on ice pushing an
Yeah.
object, and it was a huge transition physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all the leaves of life that you can think of. That was that transition to bobsled.
Yeah. So talk me into because I know about the heptathlon, all that stuff, but I don't
Yeah.
I doubt it's very common that someone is doing the heptathlon and running bobsled. So how does that even happen? Like talk me through that.
Yeah. Okay, the true story of how it happened is I wanna say in, like, maybe 2013, my track coach was like, "You should try bobsled." I was like, "Nah, I don't like being cold. I'm born and raised Los Angeles, California, like, downtown LA. No part of me no, we're not doing that. We're gonna stick to track." Then pan to 2018, I am competing for the US. I make a US team, and I'm kind of at a crossroads where I was, like, on the brink of being selected for this team, and I was one person out, and I was like, "Well, what the heck am I gonna do for my summer now?" Like, I was supposed to be chosen for this, and it was, like, the dramatic, like, you got the golden ticket to be on the team, and, like, at US Nationals, my actual coach from college was the head coach of the US team that year. He had to like
Wow.
take my golden ticket away from me and say like, actually, the person that opted out just opted back in. It was the most like the worst feeling ever. I'm sitting on like a treatment table, like celebrating making this US team. And I think it stung a little bit more because it was like my collegiate coach, where that's like
Yeah.
every athlete's dream where you're like, you have that relationship, you know, this person. They finally get the opportunity to like give you this moment. And I was like devastated. I was like, this sucks. So I was like
Yeah.
on the hunt to really just figure out what the heck I was going to do in 2016 at that point. And I had to make a choice. And so I was like, I guess I should look for jobs. So then I looked for jobs and yeah, I was like, nah, this isn't really working. So then 2018, excuse me. So that was like, this isn't really working. And I saw this like pop up. It was like for this next Olympic hopeful. And like NBC was doing this game show on like trying to pull regular life people and like make them elite athletes in the sport of bobsled. And I had a dear friend that was a decathlete. And we stayed in contact, like really good friends. We competed in Canada together for Team USA. And like my mom had passed away, his mom had passed away. So we had this just like connection with each other. And so I wrote him because he had switched over to bobsled in 2017. And he was like, I was like, hey, Evan, like, why does bobsled think you could just pull the average Joe off the street and make him an Olympian? Like, this is crazy. He was like, yeah, I think you should try it. And I'm like, no, like, I'm not doing bobsled. And he was like, no, like, it's speed and power. Like, you're very much a speed and power heptathlete. Like, I really think you should give it a try. And I was like, no, I'm okay. And I was like, maybe one day. He was like, well, too late. I already gave your information to the coach. Next thing you know, I'm being flown out for a scouting. I swear to you. Next thing you know, I'm being flown
Wait,
out
what?
for a scouting camp. Next thing you know, I'm going to team camp. Next thing you know, I am in bobsled for 4 years trying to make an Olympic team. So that's literally how I got signed up. I did not, that was voluntold. And then I stuck around. I was like, all right, I guess I can kind of, this is cool. I could do this. This is hard. This is different. I had to put on like 30, actually more than that. I competed as a heptathlete at 133, 135 pounds. I competed as a bobsled athlete at 175 to 177. So it was a very big swing for me.
Whoa.
Mentally, yeah, very different. I was a completely different athlete. I had to train. And what was hard going back to transition is I had realized a transition routine that I had set as a heptathlete was not the same. I was a totally different athlete than I was when I had that original routine, and, I had to revamp it. I had to go back to the drawing board and figure out, like, "All right, what does this look like for me? How do I show up my best?" I'm trying to show up my best, also learn at the same time and apply and do. And bobsled the women's bobsled team for the US has medaled in every Olympic cycle that they've been a part of since 2012. I think with the exceptions of one team, they have medaled. So it's a legacy program. It is not for the faint at heart and the weak. Like it's a powerhouse. It's like cut or get cut. Like there is no in between that. And that competitive space and that nature is honestly like probably one of the best experiences that I've had in terms of just athletic talent. And you do not have a choice but to raise the bar. And I mean, at the end of the day, all you can do is show up your best. You get the opportunity to do that. Sometimes your best isn't the best in the world. And that also is a shock where you have to figure out how to be okay with that. So transition into bobsled was different. You go from pushing your body on a track to pushing an inanimate object on a team with a person. And I was a brake woman. So I hop in the sled and my head's in between my legs after I push for like 30 meters. Literally, I don't see anything. The pilot drives, it operates on a T-bar system and a bungee. They do micro movements, and literally, like, my life is in someone else's hands, figuratively, and just I had to be okay with it. So it's always also great too because I think even as I look at my career, like I was an executive director of nonprofits, like I've sat at C-suite tables, like I coach C-suite executives. The letting go of control was one of the biggest things that I realized, and like true trust of, you know what, I'm going to go out and I'm going to give my best effort behind you. And I'm going to trust you to take the wheel from this. Like my job is done and it's the torch that is passed for that person to carry us through the finish line until I get to the end of the track that I've memorized and I sit up and I pull the brakes. That's my two jobs. That's all I got. That's all I'm there for. And so you really truly you learn how to initiate and let go, which is like the biggest gift as a leader because sometimes you want like ego gets it sets in and you're like I need to run every part of this, and in reality it's like you don't. Like it's okay to understand that like you're not going to be the best at everything. I honestly go into rooms hoping I'm not the best at everything because if I'm the best at everything, we need some different people in this room.
So
So yeah, that's my
that's a
thought.
really good point. That all the things you said, I'll hold it on that last part. You said like if you're the best if you're the best at everything in the room, you need a different room. Because you can't grow if you are the best. And it's like, and also what you were talking about, like a lot of times, like the relinquishing of control from leaders is something that we need to learn. I think I mean, you could let me know if you feel this way or not. Like leaders
Yeah,
fall into two camps where they're like, they want all the control or they're like, do whatever you want. And there's like very few people who are like, strike the balance of knowing when to interject themselves and then just letting their team succeed. And I
yeah.
think a lot of that comes from having the self-awareness to know what your natural tendencies are and realizing that how you lead one person on your team versus another person on your team is not going to be the same. You can't lead everyone the same because if you do that, you're going to be overbearing to one person and another person going to feel like they don't have enough attention.
Mhm. No, I fully agree with you, and there's, like, a couple of things that I pulled from that where I think they're very important. For me personally, no matter if I'm, like, have been interviewing for a job or any space that I've been able to step into with a leader, and I use air quotes for a reason, I always ask them how they define the difference between a boss, a manager, and a leader. That's like my number one question in an interview. People are like, any questions you have for me? I'm like, yeah, how do you define like how does a manager, a boss, and a leader show up in your life? And the array of answers that I get is crazy. But we won't go there with what I get from people. But I ask that question because I spend a lot of time in my executive coaching and even in my workbook. The basis of it is self leadership. How do you understand how you lead as a person before you go and try to lead a group of people? And that self leadership is defined by what you value. That's my first session with every person that I talk to. Doesn't matter if I go to a coffee chat with you or we are engaging in an actual like paid session. And the reason why I do that is because your values shape who you are as a whole. Your values will be the thing that you fall back on in chaotic moments. Your values will be the thing that you fall back on in celebration. And so when I ask that question specifically of like the difference between a boss, a manager, and a leader for those individuals, I'm actually secretly cognitively looking at what are some of the things I can pull synonyms of what they value. And so if I hear them say like a boss is someone that like gives you a checkbox list and like micromanages you, I can pull from that like, okay, this person might potentially, I don't know for sure, but making a aware, I'm being aware of the words they are saying. I can pull out, okay, this person might struggle with like a dictator, or if you're familiar with the DISC assessment, like a D type, where it's like you
Yeah.
don't, they don't do
Dominant.
well with that. Yeah. And so if they say like a manager is someone that you can bounce ideas off of, but like at the end of the day, like they're going to give you a plan that you need to do. So I'm like, okay, this person might value like organization or a lot of communication or a lot of structure. That's how might be what motivates them to yield an action. And then if they say like, oh, a leader to me is someone that like kind of takes their hands off the wheel or like they give me a point and they let me like play with it or continue. That person might value freedom and creativity of thought. And so that's why I love that question for how people define a boss, a manager, and a leader. And also like why I love and start with values. Because when you get into the heat of the moment or like hard conversations, 10 out of 10 times, the reason why there's animosity or like I say the primary emotion that they might see is anger or sadness or like however we want to define that primary emotion stems from a secondary emotion that came from our values being infringed upon. And when you can identify what that value is, then you can assess why you responded in that way Now you can change it to being an actionary leader, and then you can communicate what you need in the space in order to allow your self leadership to thrive and your team leadership to thrive. So I just gave you a whole lot, but essentially
You
that's it.
did.
Yeah, I does.
Yeah.
I gave you a whole lot, but yeah,
No,
that's what
it's
I heard.
good. It's good. Really good. No. Yeah, like I hope everyone caught that. All the listeners, like
Yeah.
you caught that with the self leadership, because I think oftentimes when people talk about leadership, they think about everyone else. They don't think
Yep.
about themselves. But that's
Yeah.
a good point that you're starting with themselves and the values piece. It is so true that when your values are infringed upon, your boundaries are crossed, it
Yeah.
doesn't feel good.
That's why I did a 5-minute, like 5-minute reset. That was a free workbook that I wrote because I'm like, everyone deserves the opportunity to be able to find this out for themselves. I had to learn it way later in life. But for me, it was to your point where you were like, how does a leader know how to pivot between the types of people that they're leading? And like some person might feel neglected, some person might feel like you're micromanaging. The important element of that as a leader, personally for me and how I define it is, are you capable of speaking to the way that the person can listen? And that's boss and a manager in my definition of it. They don't really, they give you the element of this is what you get and this is what you're doing. But a leader will take the time to step back to figure out, how can you best receive this information to yield an outcome that is aligned with who you are as a person for the greater good of this team or this organization or this KPI or this OKR, if we want to draw it to like the big things. Uh, yeah, that's the difference between a leader. Is like, are you actually creating space to understand this person's values in order to speak to how they listen? To get the
Mm,
action. At the end of the day, I'm an action-oriented coach. I think it's the athlete in me where I'm like, "Oh, I hear you. So we're gonna get to a point here, but I hear you."
yeah.
And that's I would say that's one of the most profound things that I've been able to take away from it is what I'm saying speaking to the way that they listen, and if it's not, like, call me in, like, help me understand, and that's what it is. It's that give and take of understanding and action, and that's how I define a leader.
I would definitely agree with that. It's a give and take, and sometimes you can feel like you're giving more than you're taking, but the balance is important for sure.
I kinda wanna ask you, like, how do you define the difference between a boss, a manager, and a leader?
You can definitely ask. I like that you have it in that order because I think it is a progression that someone is just a boss. And I think if someone they're there because of the title, they're there for themselves. And it's like, you do this, you do that, we need to get this done. Like, just run it down the list. I think the manager is the next level is that they might ask about like what are certain things are going to happen or things we need to do, and they're going to try and help you with it, but they're not as involved in it. You still have the way I see it is like at the back of your mind, you're like, yeah, they're asking me, but I feel like they're asking me because they want to make sure like it makes them look better. That's just my perspective on it. But a leader is, and for me, I don't think you can define leader without really servant leadership, where that person is truly there for you to remove boundaries. And they're really intentional about, I want this person to be able to do my job and replace me,
Yep.
making themselves replaceable.
Mhm.
So I think a lot of times, like whether it's because I honestly like some research I've done, a lot of times just because leaders don't get enough training, so it's not something that's done intentionally. It's just because they just don't know. But it's really understanding like you're not you look good when your team looks good. So when you try and put your team down or like take credit for everything, you look bad. But they don't realize that. So that's kind of my progression from boss manager to leader.
No, I think that's very important too because you hit on, like, the perception of the leader, and that perception, if it's not communicated, is going back to values. Like I say, I tell every person, always comes back to what you value. That person might, like, have had a background or a past, and they weren't acknowledged, and so now they lead in a way where giving acknowledgement means that, like, they don't matter, and so I love kind of breaking that, cognitive thought pattern and back to your negative thought loops to like help them understand you are at a detriment of your team because you're trying to hold on to something that's a self-perception. Like, your team doesn't see you as someone like, how you are seen and how they see you are 2 different people. So how do you realign that? And I think true leaders always take the pause to see how they can grow and get better to best serve the team that they have the opportunity to lead.
Absolutely. I would agree. I have a question that's kind of on the flip side because we're
Yeah.
talking about the leaders and how they approach their team. But those leaders also have leaders. Like you just keep
Mhm.
working your way up. So, and I'm just thinking like from the audience perspective, a lot of them is like the 20 to 40. So some of the earlier ones, they might not be in the quote leadership position yet. Emphasis on the position because I think you can lead from regardless where you are in the organization.
Agree.
But how would you, or I guess, how do you coach people to approach leaders that are not being effective leaders? Like you could see there's some gaps. I know there's different ways to approach it, but someone feels like they're not being led well.
Mhm. Yeah, no, it's a great question, and recently, actually, this has been a very prominent topic just for me in leadership coaching as a whole and just, like, coffee chats that people are like, "Hey, I got a question for you," and this has come up a lot, and
Sure.
I I always look at self-leadership as, like, honing in your own power, like, it's the typical saying, "You can control what you can control." You have to identify your values, what's really truly important to you, to then even be able to communicate what's important to you, to then even be able to communicate how you wanna show up in that space, for you to then even have the practice and consistent confidence to use your voice to say, "This is what I value. This is why I value it because it allows me to show up my best X, and I wanna show up my best X in this situation, and I'm not quite sure how to navigate that with you. Like, can you help me solve, like, X for us?" That's the difference between telling a leader that's way up there, like, "Hey, I need you to do this," and inviting them into the journey with you. That is a skill when you're working with someone in their early 20s, 30s, their first time self-leadership role. That's gonna transition into any hierarchy if they choose to go that executive route. That's gonna be one of the biggest pieces to take away is, can you communicate, can you identify your values? Can you communicate why those values are important to you? Can you identify when those values are being infringed upon or they're not being met? Because at the ultimate goal of it all is you wanna be able to show up your best performance in the best action possible. And to do that, you have to communicate with someone, and it takes time. It takes a lot of self-reflection. Like, ironically, I think that's why I named my workbook series Reflections, is because you gotta really look at yourself to be able to do that and be vulnerable enough to ask someone like, "Okay, well, this is what I value. Like, what do you value, and how do we feel like these differences are stopping me from being X best high performer that I can be for this goal or for the company or for the organization or for you, a leader." So yeah, I would say that's how I navigate and coach that situation.
That's a phenomenal way to approach it because if you don't know or understand your values, like how are you going to communicate them? Like that's really the first step. And I think a lot of us don't take the time to reflect. We're in a fast-paced society. We're always go, go, go. And we're always doing things. And we don't always take the time to think about like, wait, why are we doing this? Why am I doing
Why our
this? Oh,
curiosity.
yeah.
Yeah. And that's one of my personal values. Like, I'm pretty firm in like I call it my 3.5 because my 3 is really like a point 0.5. So it's like I value progression 100%. If I do not have a space where I can grow or learn something new, even in leadership, like, if you can't teach me something or put me on a path where I can learn and evolve, it's not a space for me. I also value authenticity. I would rather I've been coached my entire life at the highest performance you can think of. There is nothing anyone is gonna tell me that's gonna put me in a corner and cry, but I would rather know how I need to show up and how I can get better versus, like, just telling me everything is okay. Like, if that was the case, I would have been an Olympian and, like, I would have been year after 4-year cycle. There's always something you can do to be better spiritually, physically, emotionally. it goes back to progression. It can always be better. So authenticity and just showing up and owning who you are in a space, very important to me. And my third is freedom. And that freedom is like freedom curiosity, where I need to be able to bounce wild ideas that might be abstract and don't really make sense. And for someone to be like, that's out of the box, but we can roll with it. And like, or to pull my reins and tell me like, hey, so when I get into spaces and if I'm in a high conflict situation, for the most part, I can identify like, all right, this is impending on my freedom right now. Like, you're telling me that I can't work from Spain. I work remote. So I'm trying to figure out why I can't do that. And now I have my primary emotion is anger because I feel like at the root of it, my freedom is being infringed upon.
Yeah.
Now I can hold, now I'm not, I have the power of choice to either be actionary and use my words to say, hey, I really value freedom and I'm not quite sure why why this is important to me and I'm really struggling with it. And so because I value this, like how can freedom show up where we can meet in the middle and or like what does freedom look like in this space right now? Because I don't want to keep getting to I don't want to be angry. Like, and I feel like I'm angry and I'm harboring animosity for this because I don't quite understand it. I don't want to be that way. I want to choose to still feel like I have freedom. And this is how I define it. Like magic wand of success for freedom for me would look like you fill it in and then you let them say if they can step into that magic wand or not. And so you really bring it back to a collaborative effort because at the end of the day, that's a team.
Yeah. Group of people work together towards a common goal. That's powerful. And I definitely resonate with all of the ones that you mentioned, but especially the first two with the progression and authenticity. And I hone in on authenticity. And I think because that's a value of me, I can usually recognize it in other people fairly
Mm.
quickly. And I think for the most part, like if I don't feel like someone's not that authentic, they're not going to be on the podcast because I'm like, I don't, it's
It's
like,
a hard
I
no. It's
don't
a
feel
hard no. If
this.
it's not a
Yeah,
yes,
it's
it's a
like,
no.
yeah, because yeah, exactly. It's like I think that's probably at the top of my list is authenticity.
Mm,
The freedom one that you mentioned is interesting because there's aspects of that that I see, but I think for me, and I was thinking about like what would mine be? Authenticity is definitely
yeah.
one. I think mine is more autonomy over freedom because I don't need
Mm,
completely to be able to do whatever I want. I do like some structure depending on what it is, but I need to be able to do it how I think is the best way to do it, as
mm,
opposed to what we did. We've always done it this way, so this is what we're going to do. I was like, well, I feel like this way is inefficient, or we shouldn't be doing this at all. We should be doing this. So I think that's a value I have. And I think that's often why like I've left certain places because it's just like I feel like I don't have the autonomy, or I did have the autonomy, and then a new leader comes and I have these conversations about,
mm-hmm.
hey, I think we could be doing this or we could be doing that. And then I don't see any movement. I'm like, okay, either I'm going to figure out a way to just be an autonomous in what I can control, or I'm working on an exit strategy to a different team within the
Mm-hmm.
company if I like the company. And if that doesn't work, going to work somewhere else.
Yeah. 100 agree. I've definitely left some companies because of that also. And something you said that's extremely powerful that I'm very an analogy driven if you haven't noticed already. So like everything I have is like it's an analogy. So what I'm hearing from you and that autonomy and why it's important to you is like I think it's still similar to progression and in the sense of when I work with leaders that like have kids, for example, or moms that are in like high power positions at work and they're also trying to balance being a mom at the same time, they talk about like whatever conflict they're in, like, I can't get this person to do this. I'm not quite understanding like how to work with them. They might be a you where they value autonomy and like they need to be able to figure it out their way. And so I paint the picture where I'm like, okay, well, can you imagine if like your child is watching Sesame Street or Miss Rachel, whatever age range they got, whatever they're doing, and they learn the action of opening and closing a book. And so they're walking through your kitchen and they're opening and closing all the freaking doors. Like everything is open and closed. Everything is open and closed. And you're just like, stay out of the kitchen cabinets. Like stay out of the kitchen cabinets. Like you react to what's going because you react to what the child is doing because you're looking at the behavior that they're eliciting and you're reacting versus having an action for it. So you're 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 actually stealing the gift of progression for that child, because a leader is going to redirect what that action is. And I mean that in the sense of the parent is going to look at the child opening and closing doors. They just don't want them to get into chemicals or cut their fingers off. Like in reality, that's why the parent is like, you can't do that. But it's one thing to do that, and it's one thing to reposition that child into a toy with a door, an actual book, like something that actually allows them and their curiosity, their gift of progression, to your point, their autonomy, to continue to evolve, and they're no longer stealing that progression, that gift of progression for that child and you, that like next leader. And so it's the more you practice things like that and the more you can bring it to just like very situational awareness, the more quickly you can pivot, and you don't need a lot of time. It goes to my point, the 30 minutes of transition into 90 seconds. That's exactly now what I get to when I'm helping people, or I tell them, I'm like, yeah, you were upset at this person before because they just wanted to do it their way. When in reality, like all you had to do was say, like, what are the foundational pieces of your way? And how can we see, like, how does this tie to what the overall goal needs to be? And you find that red thread, and they have the motion of opening and closing the door, but you put them in the direction of like a toy truck, and now you let them do it their way.
Yeah, that's really good. I like how you're able to tie everything back to different analogies. I think that, well, that is definitely a gift that you have. Not everyone can do that in the moment. I think that that's really good.
Thanks, thanks. I try. I'm like, my goal is, if you can't remember it, you can't do it. And so I don't want, I mean, like, I love like self-determination theory, and like I can go through all the theories of leadership, and
Yeah.
I want it to make sense for people because it needs to apply to their life. I care about your everyday leadership after you close your laptop or you leave your office. Like that's what's most important to me, because it goes back to my foundational piece of values, who you are and how you show up as an individual external of your job, who you are personally, is probably how you're going to show up in your professional career. So the
That
practice never
part.
stops.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really good. Well, I feel like we were going for a while. I feel like we could easily go like
I know. I
a
can't.
lot longer, but I want to make sure, is there anything that we haven't talked about yet, like either related to you on your leadership that you want to bring up as we kind of wrap things up?
No, I mean, I believe that like there's tools out there. Like I have tools out there. My website, they're free. Like I want people to please use them, or like ask. Like I feel like we're the type of people where if someone asks us for a conversation or to like piggyback a thought or an idea, like we'll really create space for them. And I feel like ego just sometimes gets in the way and people don't ask. So like lean into it. Like I have a saying that I always say, like I operate on borrowed wisdom. I don't have 50 years of experience as a leadership coach. I've done this since 2017. I've been doing this in 2017. That's it. And not that's it to diminish it, but that's what I got. So
Still a good amount of time.
absolutely, it is. It's a great amount of time. And I'm going to go borrow wisdom from someone that's been in the space for 30, 40 plus years, because I can borrow that wisdom. Like I don't need to press the red button or scale the mountaintop to get to the top. Sometimes there's an elevator. So like I guess my takeaway would be like use the elevator. Like reach out to me, like there's free tools. Use the workbook. Like use it. Ask questions. Lean into the people that really open the door to be that mirror for you. Like that's what I feel like my gift is as a coach. And I feel like you'll say the same thing about yourself is we have that ability to not drive someone's car for them, not even sit in their passenger seat, but to be their side and their rear view mirrors of how they want to pivot with the decisions that they want to make. Yeah, like go to sidetrack. I also post like a check-in daily on Instagram. I just like pulse check with people. I'm like, hey, how are you showing up in your values? Like, how are you in your season of life right now? Like, I genuinely care about community and the gift of progression. Everyone deserves that. So, yeah, reach out, please.
Yeah, that's really good. I want to make sure people know how to reach out to
Yeah.
you, whether like you mentioned your
Yeah.
Instagram, you mentioned your
Yeah,
workbook.
you can find me everywhere. Sidetrackpath.com. At Tiffy P, TIFFIEP is my personal Instagram. Sidetrack Path is my sidetrack Instagram. You can go to my website, join the mailing list. Like you can literally just write me a DM. Like I will respond back to you. I love what I do. I love giving people the gift of progression. So yes, please reach out to me. And I truly mean that. Like, I know boundaries very well. I hold them very well. If I don't have space, I tell you I don't have space.
Yeah, that's a powerful thing because that's like a whole nother conversation about people not
We can. Well,
understanding their
round two.
boundaries.
We're gonna have
Yeah,
a
I
part
think
two.
honestly, I think I'm gonna have to have you back. I'm trying to do more of this, like more co-host type stuff, where we go deeper into specific topics after I've had someone just to introduce themselves. And I
Because I
think
got some
I could
questions
definitely
for
do that
you.
with you. Yeah, you could definitely ask me questions. You ask really good questions. That's the sign of a great coach.
Oh, I appreciate you. I appreciate you for creating space. And that's I will never take that for granted because it's a gift. Like for someone to be able to offer you time, to be selfless enough to allow someone to show up and also selfish enough to say, like, I know the parameters of like how I want to give value to the world. Like that's a great space to be as a leader. So I thank you for just operating in both those dualities.
Thank you so much. That's been good. I really enjoyed this conversation and really turning to the audience. I know you got something from this conversation. Like if it's as simple as just understanding your values, because I think that's something we don't talk enough about. But I would encourage you to reach out to Tiffany and all the incredible things that she's doing. A lot of free resources. Definitely reach out to her for coaching as well, because she is incredible at what she does. And I just want to make sure I'm supporting that. Just it's been great having you on the show.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you for just being you. Like you have such a great authentic energy and like you could tell your values are aligned with how you interact with people. And at the end of the day, like that's how you want to be remembered.
Yes, that is exactly how I want to be remembered. I appreciate you seeing that.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, for everyone listening, like I already said you got something from it. Connect with Tiffany and continue to be incredible.
Be sure to rate and review this podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform. We'll see you here next time. And be incredible. Incredible.